Okay, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Lina Stillman. As usual, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. So today is another Facebook Live of Charlas con Lina, or Talks with Lina, where every week we talk about issues that are of concern to workers. So we're a law firm for the working people, and we love talking to folks, to individuals, politicians, whoever is trying to help the workers of this town are people that we're totally interested in talking to, because we are fully committed to representing workers in their fights for justice and in their fights for fair wages, etc. So today we have Amit Bagga. So I just want to say hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers were out of work when the pandemic happened. City's unemployment rate was 13.2%. So many people, many desperate people turned to working for food delivery apps like DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, Relay, and a lot of them were already doing that. A lot of workers were already, doing deliveries. So, while delivery drivers have been essential to feeding New Yorkers, and keeping us safe at home, their working conditions, already precarious before the pandemic, have gotten even worse. Why? Because even as the delivery companies have seen sales surges, the workers' pay has remained erratic, to say the least. Because the drivers are independent workers, they're not entitled to minimum wage like regular workers, regular employees. They're not entitled to overtime. They're not entitled to benefits. And, undocumented workers and documented immigrants who are not eligible for unemployment or federal coronavirus assistance actually make up for the bulk of the workforce in New York. So this takes me to our guest today, Amit Bagga. Amit Bagga is running for a New York City Council, District 26 in Queens, which is currently held by Jimmy Van Bramer, I think. Council, this District 26 encompasses Sunnyside, Woodside, Long Island City, Astoria, and Dutch Kills. A little bit about Amit: he was Deputy Director of New York City Census Outreach Team. He was Deputy Director of Social Services and the Department of Consumer Protection. I'm so excited to have Amit to talk to us today about, number one, his platform. Number two, delivery workers. It's a cause. When he told me, when we talked about what we're going to talk about today, I was so excited, because deliveristas are just a cause that is very dear to my heart. I have a lot of delivery workers who've been clients of mine that I continue to help. I mean, I'm so excited to have you. Thank you so much for being here. So excited.
Gracias. Yes. Gracias, Lina. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for all the incredible work that you do to fight for all of the workers in our city. I know you've been at the forefront of so many important legal battles and court battles, and we are very lucky to have you as a city, and the workers of the city are very lucky to have you.
Thank you. I mean, we have a lot in common, because I know that your platform, from having talked to you, from seeing your, I know that you have workers. Your history is of a social servant who's helped workers, right? And specifically, we're going to talk about delivery workers, but you also are so committed to, to the workers of our town. And I feel like this pandemic has shown us how important these guys are to us. While me, I get to stay in my office and order food, and be safe. These guys can't. So, I feel like everybody needs to do something about, we all have to chip in a little bit and see how we can help these workers out. So, Amit, I'm gonna start. When I introduce you, is there anything else that I missed? Because I know you've done so much, but is there anything else that I've missed about your bio? So you work for the Census Outreach Team, Social Services, Department of Consumers. I mean, that's a lot already, but did I miss anything?
No, I just wanted to share, thank you so much, Lina. And I just wanted to share that I'm very honored and proud to have been a part of a number of very important labor fights here in the city. Again, once again, Amit Bagga, running for City Council, District 26. I've helped create paid sick leave for 3 million New Yorkers in the city. I helped write the city's Freelances and Free Act, which is the nation's first ever law to protect the rights of independent contractors, gig workers, and freelancers. I helped write the law that brought fair and transparent scheduling practices to fast food and retail workers in our city. And so fighting for workers is something that is not new for me. It's something that has been at the heart of my career, and it is the very heart of my campaign as well. So just wanted to share that, and very excited to have this conversation with you.
That's amazing. I love people who have this, this desire to help the guys, whether it's somebody running for council or anybody who wants to talk about workers' right is a friend of mine. So thank you again, Amit. So Amit, let's start with, so what got you thinking about delivery workers? What is it about delivery workers that, you want to help?
Yeah. Well, I first started thinking about delivery workers when, actually a number of years ago, when Seamless, which was sort of the one app that existed on its own for a period of time, really started to take off. And in its the way it was initially set up, it was really relying still on the old model, which was that the restaurants employed the delivery people in some way, shape, or form, and they got the food to you. But as that app grew and as other apps started to grow, one thing we started to see is that really the entire industry shifted. And you had all of these app companies like DoorDash, Uber Eats, Relay, that Postmates, that basically put all of these restaurants at our fingertips in ways that they had not been previously.
Right.
And what you started to see, actually, was that initially that they were charging some very, very, very large fees for providing access to these restaurants. And that got me thinking, what are those fees really going towards? How much of those fees is the restaurant keeping? And more importantly, how much of those fees is the delivery person keeping? And, just as someone who's been doing this work for a long time, I started to ask myself this question and started to ask some of my colleagues this question. And soon enough, it became very evident, thanks to much of the very, very good organizing work of Los Deliveristas Unidos and the Workers' Justice Project, that deliveristas, which we affectionately call deliveristas, the people who ride bikes or electric bikes to deliver food in New York City, were being really tremendously exploited. And there's now been a tremendous amount of press coverage that really talks about the conditions that they face, the extremely low, almost criminally low wages, the physical dangers that they face riding on our streets, most of which don't have protected bike lanes, the completely unacceptable measures and limits and expectations that the app companies have implemented on the deliveristas to make sure that they are, delivering as many meals as possible. And most importantly, we know that this work is also incredibly, incredibly dangerous. We've heard of a number of deliveristas who've actually lost their lives as a result of traffic accidents. But even just a few days ago, Francisco Villalba Ventino is a deliverista who was shot to death in the process of being robbed of his electric bike in East Harlem. So this just underscores the immense amount of dangers that deliveristas face, and really just how unstable and undignified the work has become as a result of the way in which the app companies have set up this entire system.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's great. I do remember this. I do remember thinking the same years ago when I would see the Seamless app. As a consumer, I'd always ask, I had this thing of asking the delivery person, is this going to you? Is this, and oftentimes they would say, no, it's not going to me. And of course, I personally always tip very well, but I know that some people were upset about the fees that they were having to pay, and they thought that it was going to delivery boys. And it's just a matter of educating the public about these fees, right? I mean, what are some of the biggest issues? We talked a little bit about them, but some of the biggest issues that these workers face. I know that, we talked about wages a little bit. What kind of issues do they face on a day-to-day basis to be able to provide us with this, with the service of getting our food to wherever we are?
You know, it's such an important question. Deliveristas really, as you mentioned, have been on the front lines of the pandemic this entire time, right? They are the ones who've actually been able to make sure that we are fed and that we are taken care of while we have the luxury of staying in our homes or being in our home offices or what have you. So there are a number of issues that deliveristas face. Number one, first and foremost, is criminally low pay. The industry is set up in such a way where the deliveristas are not considered employees under the law. They're actually independent contractors. So each and every single deliverista has essentially a contract with each of the delivery apps. And as a result of that, the delivery apps are really able to get away with paying wages that are not really wages, but just a fee basically for a service that the deliverista is providing. And these fees across the board do not meet the minimum wage standards. So here in New York State, we now have a $15 minimum wage. We fought really, really hard for that. Workers, organizers, labor fought really hard for that for years. Deliveristas are not getting the equivalent of $15 an hour. So that's number one. It's just that their wages are incredibly low.
And if they do make 15, I mean, I have to say, if they do make 15, they have to bust their assets to do that. They have to go many places. They have to be fast. And what does that mean, really? That means that they're putting their lives in danger to get from one place to another so that they could make those $15 an hour. I just wanted to add that. Sorry.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right. The next thing I was going to say is that they face a tremendous amount of pressure to be able to make really unreasonable delivery minimums, right? So a number of apps have place these minimums on drivers where they say you have to make a minimum number of deliveries in an hour or in a day, or you have to travel a certain number of miles. And of course, exactly what you've said, this puts all of the deliveristas in really dangerous positions. And we do not have, and this is actually really important as we think about our city's built infrastructure, right? We do not actually have a true network of protected bike lanes across the city that not only allow all of us to get safely from place to place if we choose to, but actually allow the 80,000 deliveristas that we have in our city to safely be able to earn their livings, right? And so even that lack of infrastructure is very deeply a racial justice, immigrant justice, and economic justice issue. And that's something that's very important to
how so, Amit? Tell us how so. I think that's such an important point and something I hadn't really thought about. How do you think that's a racial issue? Because I think it is, but I want to hear your take on it.
So, you know, for many of us who have the types of jobs where we've been able to cloister ourselves in our apartments, in our homes, and conduct all of our work through Zoom, you know, we're safe. But for those people, and it's now 80,000 deliveristas, and these are, you know, almost exclusively immigrants. They're immigrants from every part of the world, Central America, South America, Haiti, South Asia, East Asia, you name it. These are folks who are exactly the way you described it. They're being forced to utilize our streets to be able to earn their living in a way that they're not often earning nearly enough money, while at the same time, and this is particularly true in the boroughs outside of Manhattan, they don't have access to protected bike lanes that allow them to get from place to place safely. And so they're competing with cars, sometimes on multi-lane roads. They're competing, you know, with a lot of traffic. They're competing with bad weather. I mean, and you know, deliveristas were delivering all through the winter. In fact, it was a high time for food delivery, right? And so, really, even the lack of our built infrastructure in our city then exposes itself as a real racial justice issue, an immigrant justice issue, because the very workers who are forced into positions where they have to rely on this infrastructure to be able to earn their living can't do so safely. So it's just another example of how, you know, our city is really not prepared to deliver on economic justice issues, on economic justice for these workers on all levels.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And I feel like, you know, the fact that the majority of these people, you know, and we'll talk to Ligia Guapa in a second, but the majority of these guys, back in the day when I started representing them, for example, like, you know, the Relay app, right? Like on the Relay app, back in the day, before they were sued, I mean, Alex Bloom, who owns Relay, this app worked in such a way where in order to make any money, the guys would have to work 80 hours a week, right? And they did, and we had proof of that. We had proof that these guys were working 80, 90 hours a week, and they were outside the entire time. And the fact that they made the changes to the app is directly related to all the legal issues that they've had. But in my opinion, it's like, well, now they're worse off. Now really has made it into this. Oh, look, Ligia's here. Okay, Ligia's here. Good, great. I mean, before Ligia gets in, let me ask you another question, and maybe she can join us. So you're running for city council, right? And I've had conversations, with your friend Lincoln Ressler before. I had a conversation with somebody running in District 10. So much that the city council can do, right? But what can the city do, in your opinion, to protect these workers?
So this is a great question. One of the things that sometimes we struggle with here in New York City is that because we are a city in our legal system, we are sometimes prevented from making clear and strong labor laws, because that really, legally speaking, is the realm of the federal government and Congress and state government. However, we can really creatively utilize some of the legal authority that we have here in the city to regulate the app companies themselves, to make sure that they are, in fact, not engaging in business practices that really endanger workers. And the reason for that is because at the city level, we do have the authority to regulate business practices. If you want to do business in New York City, we have the legal authority to come to you and say, you need to get a license from the city. And in order to get that license, we can stipulate a lot of different requirements. And so very soon, I'm based on a lot of research, we've done, we're talking to some organizers and just really looking at the industry, and also really looking at sort of what the legal authority of the city of New York really is. We're going to be releasing a plan where we basically are going to lay out how we want to regulate the business practices of the app delivery companies, so that they are not allowed to exploit workers. They're not allowed to cheat restaurants, which is another very big issue. If you talk to the restaurants, they dislike the app delivery companies as much as the workers do. And we can force the app delivery companies to have real transparency to consumers around exactly how their money is being spent. Because in this day and age, particularly in a city like New York, no consumer wants to be handing hard-earned money over to a massive corporation that is exploiting workers and exploiting small businesses. And so, we can be aggressive in this way. We can be creative in this way. And I hope I will be releasing a plan soon that's going to outline some of the ways in which we can really crack down on some of the worst practices in the industry.
That's awesome. I very much look forward to hearing all the details, but it's definitely time for somebody to do something about what's happening. Manuel, is Ligia here? Did she enable the camera? I don't know if we should wait for her, or maybe I can ask Amit another question.
Yes, how are you?
Hi, Ligia, welcome. How are you?
I'm very good. Ligia, I apologize. I'm in the streets.
No, it's fine. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. We're having a great conversation about deliveristas and delivery boys and the things that they face. And Ligia, I know that you've been such an instrumental part in helping these workers. I know that you're very involved in the Deliveristas Unidos. So Ligia is the directora del Proyecto de Justicia Laboral, the Workers' Justice Project. Ligia, I'm going to ask, so I was asking, we were talking to Amit about, the issues that the workers face, what the city can do to protect the workers. What kind of dangers do these guys face? So let's talk about that for a second. What kind of dangers do these workers face, doing deliveries? Let's talk about, because, part of the reason why we do this, guys, is to create, for people to know what's going on, because they look at the news, they might not join your, they might not know anything about your organization, Ligia. There's a lot of people who don't really know what really goes on. All they know is that they want their food in 2 hours ago, and they want their food, they want their Pizza Hut, and they don't know much else. So we need to start educating folks about what really goes on. So what delivery workers face dangers. What can we do to help them with this? I don't know, Amit or Ligia, you guys can, you know.
Yeah, I can share to talk about food delivery work. Group of workers since the pandemic. The reality.
I think we're losing Ligia a little bit. Ligia, we can't really hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Can
Yeah.
you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm in the street. So I was just explaining that food delivery work it's not a new type of work.
Right.
You know, it's something that has already. It's a type of work that has existed before the apps. Workers have already been experiencing slavery working conditions before the apps. And due to the pandemic, most workers stopped working for the restaurants and started relying on the apps as a way of survival. And what we have noticed is that the food apps have just disrupted the entire industry by making the conditions worse every single day. And the way that this has happened, it's because workers are having stripping away from basic labor protections, such as access to minimum wage, access to health and safety protections, access to the possibility to be paid sick leave, actually having to the restaurants to pay for their own bikes. Through the apps, what workers are now are actually considered independent contractors, but are treated as workers. And what has made the lives of workers has been more difficult and more dangerous. And how? Workers every day have to invest over $2,000, $3,000 just to be able to enter in the food delivery industry.
Wow.
And on top of that, food delivery apps like DoorDash, Uber Eats, Relay are not mandated to pay a minimum wage. What workers ended up just being paid is actually the tips. That's what consumers don't understand, is that because they're independent contractors, the apps are not obligated to offer a wage. And the apps are just taking advantage by saying, actually promising workers that they can make $20 on tips, which is not true during the pandemic.
Right.
And on top of that, what we're seeing is that the job is becoming one of the most deadliest jobs of our country. Look at New York City. Just this past year, we have had dozens of workers who were killed in the streets because of traffic crimes, who were violently killed due to violent e-bike robberies. Just this Monday, Francisco Villalba was a food delivery worker that was shot 2 times because criminals tried to steal his bike. And that is just example how this job has become one of the deadliest jobs of our nation, but one of the jobs that has been invisibilized. The police, the district attorneys have completely been inactive about offering any protections against e-bike robberies. The apps have been exploiting workers by avoiding to pay minimum wage, mandating them to actually make a quota of deliveries of 6 to 10 deliveries per hour or every 2 hours, making them travel longer distances and making them carry excessive amount of essential products or food. And the restaurants, who in this case should be the allies, most of the times are also the ones who are also discriminating by denying them access to bathrooms, by denying them a shelter to actually protect from the cold, from harsh weather conditions. These are just examples of how the government, the apps, the consumers, the restaurants have been complicit in the abuse and the exploitation that food delivery workers are experiencing before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and until now.
That's right. And, and if we were to talk about, who are the winners of this war that's going on, and all of these apps competing with each other, a lot of people, like Ligia said, a lot of restaurant workers, a lot of my clients had to go from being at the restaurant, being busboys in the kitchen, to to doing delivery. So who are the winners? I still don't know. But one of the challenges that delivery workers face are issues of language access, right? How can we make sure that these workers know about protections? Like what can we do to help them? Because Amit and I were talking about the issue of the language. What is your guys' take on that? What can be done about that?
Obviously, New York City needs to recognize that most of the workforce that happens to be doing this essential work are actually indigenous communities from Latin America, from South Asia, East Asia. And one of the biggest challenges is making sure that people really can connect with the community by creating language access, not only in Spanish, but also in indigenous languages. From Quiche, Mam, but also Mixteco, Nahuatl, and also making sure that can access other workers in the South Asian and the East Asian community, and even the African communities as well. But one of the biggest challenges is not only connecting in language access, but Amit mentioned something very critical. There is few rights that workers are entitled. There is few protections that workers can rely in order to be able to do this work safely. For instance, Francisco Villalba, who was just killed this Monday at 10:30 p.m., does not have a life insurance or health insurance that can allow him to cover all the medical cost, the funeral cost, that at this point nobody's responsible, nor the restaurant, nor the consumers, nor the apps. And when it comes to e-bike robberies, who covers the operating cost of food delivery workers? When a worker gets injured, they don't have access to workers' compensation, or when they get sick, they don't have access to paid sick leave days. So there is few protections, and that has created more distrust with community and anger and frustration with food delivery workers who feel that the city has failed them. The apps and the restaurants have been left to exploit them and to abuse them in the worst, working conditions that I think probably that we have seen in our time.
Right. I think of deliveristas now as like they're the modern day, slaves. I know that people think that they're making so much money. They're not. And I was telling Amit before, Ligia, a lot of them have I give a lot of them keys to my office so they can come and pee up here on the 12th floor of my building, because they don't have anywhere to go. So I often have people calling me to see if they can use my bathroom, because people just don't know how bad it is. Amit, what do you as far as the language access? I know you had some stuff to say about it before. So tell us a little bit about from what can the government do? What can somebody like you, if you were to be elected, like what can we do about the about language access, the issue of language access for delivery workers?
Yeah, it's a great question, and so much of what I have personally learned about this issue is really from Ligia herself and all of the incredible work that she and the Deliveristas and Workers' Justice Project do. I'm not going to be overly detailed about this because we're going to release this in our plan, but addressing this issue is a top priority for us because, again, language justice is economic justice. And if these workers, when they're out in the snow and the rain and the cold or the incredible heat, and there's a problem with an order, or there's something that's gone wrong with a customer or with a restaurant, if they cannot effectively communicate that problem with the app delivery company, they are going to be the ones who are ultimately screwed. The app delivery company, between its business practices and its algorithms, is going to make sure that the worker is the one who's bearing the brunt of that lost sale and they're not absorbing that loss. And so really making sure that we can require the availability of a real live person to be able to effectively communicate with the deliveristas is something we're taking a very hard look at, and something that we as a city should be demanding in any regulatory approach that we take to the app delivery companies.
Okay, awesome. That's great. That's great to know. I've always thought that's a big issue, and I think, you know, it's a good, you know, language access is something that, you know, they definitely help with. So, Amit, does the city have the authority to do this? To, you know, with the issue of that, like how does the city have the authority to do this?
So let's talk about this a little bit. You know, earlier in our conversation, I was talking about the way in which our government is structured and things that Congress can do, and, you know, our representatives in Albany can do, and then there are things that we can do here in the city. One of the central issues that workers face here is an issue that we in the business call misclassification, right? And this is a problem when companies, hiring parties, essentially do what these app delivery companies are doing, which is they hire these workers who are workers, right? They are workers as independent contractors. You know, they get a 1099 at the end of the tax year, not a W-2. And that what that means is that all of these workers are exempt from the many, many, many protections that someone who is an employee will have under the law, and this is under state law, right? So those protections include things like $15 an hour minimum wage, workers' compensation protections, many different types of protections against sexual harassment, against racism, against discrimination in the workplace. A lot of those protections are not available to these workers. Now, here in New York City, we are fortunate. We are the only jurisdiction in the country that has a law that does protect freelancers. It's called the Freelancers and Free Act. I'm very happy to have been one of the co-authors of it, and really thank the Freelancers Union and Brad Lander for their huge leadership on that front. And so there are certain protections that these workers have, but the majority of them, they don't. So that's one very big issue that we've got to fight at the state level to fix this problem. I want to really give credit where credit is due to State Senator Jessica Ramos, who is the chair of the State Senate Labor Committee. She has been a real leader on this issue, and I know that she is ultimately going to get New York State to a place where misclassification is no longer a problem. But while we are still dealing with that, here at the city level, we have the legal authority to regulate the business practices of the apps. And in regulating their business practices, we can really look at targeting those practices that really undermine workers, right? So the practices that force workers to have a minimum number of deliveries in an hour or in a day, that force workers to, you know, take on all sorts of burdens that they are really not able to take without appropriate compensation. We can look at all of these practices, and we can create a licensing scheme here in the city that deals with these issues.
Great. This question can be for Ligia or for you, Amit. So we've been talking a lot about the categorization, right, of these delivery workers as freelancers or employees. Do you guys think the answer to helping these workers is to treat them as employees? Because I know that, I know as a lawyer, my older fights had a lot to do with, you know, how they were not being paid overtime. You know, like Ligia said, because they're not employees, the employer is not required to put them on the workers' comp. So if they have an accident, which is, you know, not all of them are going to have an accident that's where they're going to get killed. But I know a lot of deliveristas who have broken bones, they break bones. They can't work for months on end because they've worked it, and they can't really say, oh, I'm employed by such and such. So what do you guys think is the answer to helping these workers, to helping these deliveristas, to treat them as employees, or what do you guys think?
I can take on a little bit, obviously, the perfect solution is for these workers who are doing essential work to have full rights as workers, right? And have full guarantee of minimum wage, worker protections, and other essential rights that workers must have as workers. And as Amit said, that's something that the state is the only one that can regulate and has the power to do it. At the city level, the city has certain powers to ensure that while the state, figured out the misclassification, because there is a misclassification, and that's not a question, right? Like that's a real issue.
Right.
What in New York City, the reason we're tackling specifically New York City, because we feel at the New York City level, the city can actually start acting ASAP, do something now to start regulating the business practice of the apps. And why? The first is because the apps, actually the practice of food delivery apps on bikes is a practice that it only happens in New York City. There is 80,000 food delivery workers on bikes that are doing this work every single day, running the streets, just in New York City. And a great percentage of the market is actually these apps have it in the city. So there is, as Amit said, that there is a sense of urgency for city council, the mayor, the speaker, to actually make rapid improvements for delivery workers and control and being able to regulate the business practice of food delivery apps in New York City specifically, because the way these apps operate in upstate New York is completely different than New York City. And the conditions, I bet to you, are much worse, to the extreme of slavery. It only happens in New York City. And obviously it's happening in other states. But because this work is done in bikes, because this work is mostly done by indigenous communities, migrant workers, there is all kind of issues that workers are facing in our city. There is safety in the streets, there is crimes in the streets, there is the distances, the excess of food that they have to carry on bikes, and all this set of issues that are created because of the lack of equitable infrastructure in New York City, that it needs to be addressed by elected officials who have power to do something now in real time in our city.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Ligia, how is, so I know I follow you guys. I follow deliveristas. I know that you've had a big, you've had a big say in helping these guys organize. How is the Workers' Justice Project helping delivery workers organize? How are you guys doing that?
Yeah, so full disclosure, Workers' Justice Project, it's a worker center that has a history of a decade organizing immigrant workers, mostly in industries of construction, house cleaning for the most part. Mm-hmm. It was recently during the pandemic, because we were one of the very few organizations that rebelled against the government and said, no, we're not going to shut down. We're not going to close the doors on our people. We're going to stay open. Because we knew, based on our own experience with Hurricane Sandy, being also operating as emergency relief center that
Right.
it was really immigrant workers who were going to be on the front lines doing recovery and relief work. And we knew that. We did not know that while the city shut down, the streets was going to be run by food delivery workers, and it was 80,000 who were doing this work. And discovering that it's one of the, it actually was the only fastest growing industry in our city, where workers were experiencing the worst working conditions. And it was really in the pandemic that we started connecting with food delivery workers who came to our doors looking for masks, cash relief, food, support, and discovering that it was until mid-May that workers, because the government, the restaurants, the apps have denied any protections. They were forced to self-organize through group chats, Facebook groups, collectively working in collectives. And it was actually through those, by building trust with the different food delivery networks, that we were able to bring everybody together to visualize their struggle on October 15 of 2020. And not only that, but collectively bringing together to demand, to make a specific demands for the apps, the restaurants in the city. And it was really then in October 15 that the city, for the first time ever, started looking very closely at what were the issues of food delivery workers. And it was the time, it was the moment where the different networks started to form Los Deliveristas Unidos as a way to band together and say that they're not alone anymore, that they're going to be fighting until the end at whatever cost it is to demand essential rights. And since then, Los Deliveristas Unidos is really a collective of different networks of food delivery workers who have who are building and are operating self-defense committees throughout the city, in the Bronx, Queens, Manhattan, Brooklyn, to demand and fight for essential rights. Right now, food delivery workers are the ones who are doing outreach, who are connecting with different groups, and one of their goals is to be able to build a more collective, inclusive collective that also brings East and South Asian workers and African workers to demand the exact same, to demand essential rights, because this is an issue that is not only affecting Latino workers, it affects all app food delivery workers who are doing work through the apps.
Right. It affects, I want to go a little further and say, Ligia, that it affects minorities and it affects vulnerable populations. It's not just Latinos. I mean, it isn't. It's just minorities, Bangladeshi. There's a lot of Asian workers. There's a lot of African American
workers.
Workers, exactly. And so, Ligia, you've heard, and Amit, and you've heard a little bit of his plan for to help this community out. How do you think, based on what he's told us about his plan, and I know that he's not revealing the whole thing, and I know that we'll know more about it in more details, but how do you think his plan is going to help ultimately the plight of the deliveristas?
So we really appreciate Amit and other elected candidates and even elected officials talking and discussing these issues with workers, with organizations who are leading this fight. I think one of the most important elements of drafting any plan is understanding the issues and listening from people who are suffering directly. And I think one of the most beautiful things that Amit has done is reach out to really understand how the industry operates, what are the issues, and he has had a vision of regulating the industry and the business practices, and we completely believe that that's right. That's the right approach. That at the end of the day, it is apps who needs to be regulated because they are the ones who have been profiting billions of dollars on the back of workers.
Right.
And we cannot let billion-dollar apps continue to operate to make billions of dollars, exploit workers,
Right.
and not abide to the rule of law. And that's exactly what Amit has been visioning, that there needs to be a strategic plan about how apps need to be regulated. Their business practice needs to change. And that's exactly what we need for New York City to do, to regulate the business practices of billion-dollar apps who have taken full control of the restaurant industry and our economy.
Right, because what people don't understand is that there's investors, right? There's investors behind these apps. There were investors behind Relay. There are investors behind, Seamless. There were investors behind Grubhub. DoorDash has $1 million, venture capitalists. What people need to understand that these are the guys making the money. The guys behind the money are making the money, and they're not doing it to help workers out. They're doing it because they care about the bottom line. So I believe that regulation is 100% the way to go. I think that I've always thought that something needed to be done about that. And so I was asking before, who are the winners of the pandemic and where it has brought us to need these workers so much. We rely so much on them. I mean, I personally ordered food for my mother every day because I didn't want her to go outside. So as I never did before, I relied on it so much, and I continue to rely on them. But I feel like something needs to be done about the worker, the conditions. Ligia, what are some of the things that are you hearing from the libreristas? What are you hearing out there? What are they saying? I know that I know the libretista who died, unfortunately. It's so sad. He died protecting his bike. I know their bikes are stolen. I mean, what are they saying out in the field? What are some of the things that you can share with us that from working directly with the libretistas? I mean, I know what they tell me, my clients, the people tell me, but you're so much more in touch with them. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. We were just a few minutes ago with the family of Francisco Villalba. And, one of the most painful things to experience is to have to lose a brother. And this is exactly what happened with Francisco Villalba. A family from Guerrero lost a brother who had worked in the food delivery industry for almost 10 years, whose dream was to go back to Mexico, to see his father, to enjoy and being able to live with his father, who had been very sick. He recently lost his grandmother as well. And his plan was to leave at the end of the year, to go back to Mexico, to get married to his longtime girlfriend. And it did not happen. And it did not happen because on Monday morning, right after finishing his work shift with DoorDash, and while on his way home, he was violently and brutally attacked. He was shot 2 times, one in the stomach and one in the neck. And that just happened at 10:30 p.m. And the reason it happened is because they wanted to steal his bike. And people would say,
those bikes are expensive too. I know that, I've read that one of those bikes, the electric bikes, it can really set this guy's $2,000-$3,000. And if so imagine if I know one guy who lost two bikes. So imagine how much these guys have to make in order to replace that electric bike. And I'm sorry to interrupt, Ligia, but I just wanted to.
Yeah, and people would not understand why would he decided to defend his bike. And what people need to understand is that these bikes are not only very costly, but it's the only way to work. So they're not only stealing a bike, but they're trying to protect the opportunity to be able to work and survive one of the worst, crises of our time. And these are the only jobs people have. There is no other jobs available for workers during this time. And while I was talking to the family, there was a lot of pain, there was a lot of frustration, and people just told me, they were saying, how some of them said, it is unbelievable how dangerous our work has been and it continues to be, and nobody does anything. Nobody says anything.
Right.
There is a lot of anger. There is a lot of frustration that, despite the fact that they have been making it visible on the media, mobilizing marches, visuals, still the city has been silent, and nobody has taken the right steps and the steps to start regulating the apps and offering basic protections. And he said, one of the workers have said on the media that they feel that they are the forgotten essential workers of our city, who have no rights and no protections. And that is the truth of one of the wealthiest city that exists in the world. Workers who are doing essential work and keeping New Yorkers fed cannot afford to live with dignity, have basic protections, and are earning slavery wages, poverty wages.
That's right. Yeah, thank you for that. This brings me to something you and I were talking about before, the excluded workers in state budget. And I know that I really wanted to talk about this because I want to know, I think a lot of people want to know what, I hate the fact that these guys, that the excluded workers, I hate the fact that so many people were excluded from everything, from every single piece of help. There's no $1,400 for these guys. There's absolutely nothing. And I think they've been relying on organizations like like your organization, Ligia. I know that the organization where I sit on the board, Mixteca, I know Mixteca has done a lot. We've done a lot of fundraisers, and we've given a lot of help to our members and even people who are not members. I know the Laundry Worker Center has done a lot. So it's been mostly a private effort. It's been mostly like just us, the community, helping the excluded workers. Amit, tell us a little bit about what's being done on the government level. I mean, is there some sort of proposal or something for these guys or for the excluded workers? What's going on?
Yeah, it's a great question. I really have to give credit where credit is due here. It's really been an amazing, amazing worker-led organizing and actions for months, for a year now, that has culminated in a 2-week-long hunger strike. There are workers across our city who've been striking for 2 weeks without food. This is day 14. And they are calling for $3.5 billion in the state budget to fund those very excluded workers that you talked about, domestic workers, deliveristas, laundry workers, sex workers, right, who have also been left out of any sort of assistance from the federal government. We can't forget them. And these workers are saying that what they are demanding is 1.8% of the state's entire budget for the next fiscal year. And Andrew Cuomo has so far refused to agree to these terms. And we are not a state that can call ourselves a state that is delivering on justice for workers, that is delivering on justice for Black, brown, and immigrant New Yorkers, if our state can't agree to spend just 1.8% of its budget on 300,000 workers in New York City who have put their lives on the line during the entire COVID-19 pandemic and yet have not received a single dime in relief or support. And so I really want to give huge credit to all the workers. Make the Road New York Communities for Change, the Fund Excluded Workers Coalition, Churches United for Fair Housing Action, Daisy's Rising Up and Moving, Workers Justice Project. The list is very, very, very long. It's actually been kind of an amazing thing to see. But I think we are at, despite the fact And one thing I think is very important for all your viewers to know is that the state budget that I'm talking about, where that $3.5 billion has to come from, is literally being decided in the next 24 to 36 hours. I mean, April 1st, we have a law on the books in the state of New York that by April 1st, our state budget has to be negotiated, has to be done. And so we have the real fighters in Albany, including State Senator Jessica Ramos, who I mentioned earlier, and many others in the Assembly as well, who are fighting really hard to make sure that we get these $3.5 billion and that we, in fact, increase taxes on those billionaires, the 66 billionaires that we have in the state of New York, who have made billions and billions of dollars over the course of the last year, while 300,000 New Yorkers have suffered in this way. And so, you know, that's just one thing I want to talk about. I want to give a huge shout out to all the workers who've been fighting for their lives as part of this fight. And, you know, here at the city level, I just want to, provide a little bit of a vision for the future. You know, we've done a lot of things in the last 7 years where we have tried to lift the floor for workers, from paid sick leave to fair work week for fast food workers, and protections for laundry workers and carwacheros. And, you know, we've really started to do a lot of this work. But as you all know, the power of any of the changes that we really have made or want to make here in the city is only as good as how educated workers are about their rights. Right. And we know that millions of workers across the city, particularly Black, brown, and immigrant New Yorkers, don't have full access to all of the information about all of the rights and laws that actually exist to protect them and the ways in which they need to fight for new ones. And so I have a proposal that in the first year of the next mayoral administration and the next council, I want to allocate $100 million, which is just a tiny bit over 0.1% of the city's budget. So in the whole scheme of the city's budget, it's a drop in the bucket, right, to publicly fund worker organizing in every language across all 5 boroughs. So we are taking our taxpayer dollars and we're saying we're putting them directly into the hands of local, credible, community-based organizations like Workers' Justice Project, so that they have the capacity to truly organize workers in ways that allow workers to fight for their rights, be aware of their rights, and have employment with dignity. So that's a little bit of a vision for the future. And if I am elected, that is something that is going to be my #1 priority.
That's amazing. Thank you so much to the both of you. Look at that. We're finishing on time for the first time in a long time. So Maniacal, I want to thank you, Ligia, for everything you do. I watch you guys closely. I've been seeing the Libreristas Unidos. I see what they do, how they've been organizing. It's amazing. I think we all need to do a little bit, and we all need to do our part. You both are doing a lot. I try to do my part. I try to do my part in educating people, educating workers, educating everybody. I think this is a huge issue. I loved that we talked about it today because, quite frankly, it needs to be talked about. It needs to be talked about more and more often in many, many, many different venues and many different, people need to know what's really going on. And until people do, we're not going to have any change. And, if we have somebody like Amit who's elected and, and we have real legislation passed, I think we can start to make some real improvements in the lives of people like Libreristas who are so essential. The pandemic really revealed the precarious environment, the daily reality of these workers as they take these risks to serve us. And we need to be cognizant of that. And all of us who have the privilege of being able to stay home and not be out there weathering the cold, not being able to go to the bathroom, need to do a little more. So Amit, thank you so much for being here with us. I love talking. I hope that we can continue talking to see what we can do. If there's anything that we can do for you, please let us know. I don't know if you need us to do anything. I don't know if you want to, if there's any call to action that you want people to have, let us know about it, because I am very good at telling people what the call to action is. And I know that there are people that are very, very interested in our fight, because quite frankly, your fight is my fight. every day I interested in knowing how else we can help our communities, our communities of color, our migrant communities, really every community, because it's not just, it's not just, it's the community in general, right? But the working community is the one that I'm particularly more interested in helping. So is there anything that we can do on me to help you, to help in your campaign? Is there anything that we can do for you?
Thank you so much for asking, and thank you so much for having me here tonight, Lina, and for all of the incredible work that you do and the space that you create. I mean, I don't know where else in New York City someone is facilitating a conversation like this on a Wednesday night. So I have to thank you for doing your huge part, not only to fight for workers in the courtroom, but also to really spread the knowledge about the issues that workers are facing. Once again, my name is Amit Bagga. I am a candidate for City Council in District 26, Sunnyside, Woodside, Long Island City, and Dutch Kills. And I am running on a platform to make sure that every single New Yorker has access to opportunity so that each and every single one of us can live with dignity and build power together. If you like what you've heard tonight, you want to get involved, please visit my website, www.amitforcouncil.com. Also follow me, most importantly, on Instagram. My handle is Amit for Council, AMIT for Council, and just direct message me. Direct message me and I will reach back out to you. A member of my team will reach back out to you. We are calling voters in the district. We are knocking on doors. We are sending text messages, and we need your help. We want you to get involved. And if you believe that New York City is a city where every single worker has employment with dignity, this is a campaign that you want to get behind. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, and District 26 is such a special district. I was talking to our friend Lincoln Ressler a couple of weeks ago, talking about how diverse District 33 is, right? And if you're into this kind of stuff like I am, I mean, District 26 is really, it's a very special district. The diversity that you will find in District 26 is unparalleled, right?
That's
we have Latinos, we have everybody. It's like you are basically in the world if you're in District 26, and all the wonderful things that come with it, all the wonderful food, all the wonderful things that happen there. Amit, thank you. I wish you the best of luck. Like I said, if there's anything we can do for you, please let us know. I want to continue this conversation offline to see how we, to see how we can help and see how we can get other people involved in this fight, which is your fight, it's my fight, it's our city, and we need to make it better for everybody. Everybody needs to feel safe in the city. Everybody needs to, like Amit's, is saying, dignity for all workers, dignity for all those people who help us every day to be, to be more comfortable. Without the deliveristas, you have to get your ass to the store, buy your own food, cook it, all of these things, okay? So help us in this fight, help Amit, get involved, okay? Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Amit. Thank you, Manuel. And have a great week. We will see you next week at 8. Bye, everybody.